Have you ever counted the lines on your TV set? Well, okay, you do have a life. But if you did count them, you would find on the old TVs anyway, 625 lines on the screen. Now, the old cathode ray TVs shot electrons from the back to the line number 1 and lit up the screen. And then dropped to the second line, shot electrons and lit up the screen, all the way down to 625 and went back up again and started over again. Different parts of a picture on the screen sent at different times. Now, the new TVs are quite different technology with LEDs and all of that, but the principle is the same. Different parts of a picture lit up at different times, and we are able to see a whole picture. How come we do that? It's because of a process between our eyes and our brains that is called persistence of vision. So we're able to see different things at different times and put them all together into one picture. That's a bit like the story we had of Samuel this morning. The people, it seems, had lost their ability to see and to understand and to hear God. And so Samuel heard this voice, assumed it was Eli that was speaking, and ran to him and said, "Here I am." And Eli said, "No, I didn't call you," and went back to sleep and heard the voice again, got up again and went to Eli. "No, I didn't call you." And the third time, heard the voice, and Eli said, "This must be God calling. This is God speaking to you." And so that's the way calls usually are, that God speaks to us at different times, and we're able to put together a whole picture and to know that this is what God wants for us. Now, call is often associated with ministry, and most ministers will be able to talk about how they were called. For most, it was more like with Samuel, that there was different things happening at different times that finally one puts together that this is what God wants for me. Not often is it all one time, although you probably heard that old story about the preacher that was getting up and saying how they had been called to God, that they were out plowing one day, looked up in the sky, and there in the clouds formed the letters GP. And that was a call to go preach. A disgruntled parishioner in the back pew grumbled, maybe it meant go plow. Well, most of us have worked through some of that calling, and it's in other areas of our life as well, as I'll talk about. For me, it was many times. I think the beginning was at confirmation class in grade 8. We went to see the movie A Man Called Peter, about Peter Marshall. It was all about his life, in which God spoke to him on the moors in Scotland and said, go and preach. And he eventually became a Presbyterian minister, ended up being the chaplain in the U.S. Senate. I went home that night praying to God that I'd be a minister just like Peter Marshall. Well, of course, that was left by the way when you're young, you know. And again, in grade 11, there was a time when I heard a sermon about the great need for ministers in our time to go forward. But the call is many times since, usually a respond to need, and each time it is about trying to listen to what does God want for one's life. And for me, I ended up spending half my career in interim ministry because it seemed to all go together as a calling from God. Persistence in vision. And I think for everyone in the work that they do and the career that they are following, there is that same way in which there is a repeated message that you put together to say, yes, this is what God is calling me to. This is my life work. And our hope is that everyone in their work and career has that sense of call, that this is what God wants them to do. We used to watch Mike and Molly, the sitcom, before turning in for the night. Mike was a police officer in Chicago, and his hat kept blowing off. Molly, his wife, was a very dedicated school teacher and often showed that in the school. She had a sister, Victoria, who was the family flake. Too many men, too much marijuana. She was an esthetician and hairdresser. She got a job in the local funeral home. People said to her, "Isn't that weird, being among all those dead bodies and so forth?" Now, most of us have made quite different arrangements than the traditional for our funerals. But she said, "No, I'm doing the best I can to make someone look really good for the last time their loved ones will lay their eyes on them. And I'm doing the very best I can to make someone look the best they can be when they meet Jesus for the first time." It was her calling, that sense that this is what God wanted. Well, I think for most of us, we've gone through looking at our work and thinking about what do we enjoy in life, what is needed out there and will provide service to the whole community. We have the skills to do certain jobs, and it seems to all come together in a number of times that we say, yes, this is our calling. This is what God wants us to do. And in all of our avocations, which we maybe exercise a little more when we are retired, we find out what seems to fit us, what gives us a lot of encouragement and hope, and what is confirmed many times over that this is what God wants for me right now. Well, we have the same principle usually in partnerships. For most of us, it happens to be confirmed over some time and many times together. Now, Prince Harry says that the first time he met Meghan Markle, he knew he was going to marry her. It's not usually the case for us. It's usually that we spend lots of time socializing together, that we are in a number of events together, that we share something of our life together, and after some time, it seems all of that comes together to say, yes, this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. Persistence of vision, that this seems to all work out to be right for us. And that's true in our vision for the church. Over the past few years, there has been time in those meetings looking at what are the things we want Arundel to become. What are the needs out in the community that we want to respond to? What are the relationships that we have in the church that we want to encourage? All of those groups, there's such a list of them for Arundel, the groups that get together to do a number of things. Always look into the question, why are we here? What does God want for us? How can we provide a ministry to the community? Even in the search committee, I expect that you've spent lots of time back and forth with various candidates trying to figure out if they're the right one, searching for that call from God that says, yes, this is where I want the church to be at this time, and this is the leadership that we need in all our lives. We follow very much that principle that came up in our story about Samuel being called by God. At various times, we wondered, is this the call? Is this God speaking? Who is talking to us? And finally, we can put it all together, knowing that it is God nudging us, that God speaks to us many times, and that we put it all together to recognize that this is a vision, that this is the call that God is offering to us.